Testing.
Good evening, folks. I now call to order the Thursday, August 27, 2026 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. We will start with item 3, public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, item 4A, consideration of an action of the approval of the minutes of the August 13th, 2026 meeting. Commissioners, you have those minutes in your packets. Any discussion, or do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Who had the, Savannah, did you have the second? All right, I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Brown, a second by Commissioner Patel. Any further discussion? Please vote. And that passes 6-0. Thank you very much, everyone. We will move on to item 5A, consideration of an action on the Rye Hill Section 6 preliminary plat extension. Ethan Cantu. Hello, Ethan. How are you?
Hello. How are you?
What do you got?
Yes. So tonight for you guys, I do have the preliminary plat extension for Rye Hill Section 6. All right, so let's get into it. So this is going to be about 40 acres of single-family residential located within Rye Hill. It's got 117 lots, 5 reserves, and 2 blocks. And those lots are going to be consisting of 40, 50, and 60-foot wide lots, with the corner lots being an additional 10 feet wide. There is a 30-foot drill site access easement located within the proposed right-of-way in this plat, and prior to final plat approval, this must be abandoned, and that will be located in the master notes, similar to what you've seen with previous plats. And like all of our plats, so these are going to be located south of FM 2759 and east of 762, and access to this portion of Rye Hill will be provided via Rye Hill Parkway, traveling through sections 5 and 4. So looking here on the general plan, this is the area that section 6 is located in. And just a little bit of background. So the plat was previously approved unanimously by you guys on August 28th of 2025. Preliminary plats are effective for 1 year. So the plat will expire August 28th of this year if the 1-year extension is not approved tonight. So, and the developer is actively working on their construction plans and will proceed with final plat submission once those are obtained. So here's a look at that preliminary plat. And yeah, so staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat extension for Rye Hill Section 6. And if there's any questions at this time, I can take those from you guys.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion that we approve the Rye Hill Section 6 preliminary plat extension request. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I've got a second from Commissioner Brown. Any further discussion? Please vote. That passes 6-0. Thank you very much. Let's see. Oh, you're done, huh? Okay. Thank you very much. We will move to item 6. So we have a public hearing, and then we will have consideration and action on a recommendation on the proposed text amendments to the Lake Point Redevelopment District, Chapter 2, Zoning, and Chapter 10, Definitions of the Sugar Land Development Code to the members of the City Council. We have Jessica Rodriguez. Let's hear the staff presentation first, and then I will open the public hearing. It's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, commissioners. Just to bring you up to speed on where we are, this is an amendment to the Lake Point Redevelopment Code, sorry. We've talked about this a few times here with the commission. We've had 2 previous workshops, one on June 25th and another on July 23rd. We have recognized that there are opportunities within the Lake Point Redevelopment District when working with Phase 1 of Lake Point Green and our initial workings with Phase 2, maintaining density, preserving tree canopy, and preserving that existing driveway network that will then turn into streets. The Lake Point Redevelopment Code was adopted in December of 2023 with a redevelopment concept plan that was approved by council in May of 2025. The redevelopment concept plan approved multifamily, urban homes, townhomes, and some flex commercial space for Levitt, who is the developer of the former Floor campus of 52 acres. Why are we here? So staff has initiated this amendment to the code. Lake Point is a key redevelopment site for the city, as well as this is in alignment with the all-in initiative of the city's council's strategic action plan with fostering sensitive redevelopment. A recap that we've talked about with the workshops, we've talked about the pedestrian realm and removing the pedestrian realm where we have the existing parking garage. And with that existing parking garage, we've talked about measuring those setbacks. We've also looked at development standards for new buildings and defining a major redevelopment, and then having applicability standards in there. We have looked at corner lots. We have looked at the utility reserves with those side yard setbacks, as well as the average 40-foot lot widths, and with that density, the gross acreage, and then the urban home front doors. With this, I'm going to start going in section by section of the changes and the proposed changes to the code. The first section that we're going to look at, and this one is a bit lengthy, is section 2-118. Within this table, we have clarified where we're measuring that existing, the setback with the existing parking garage, and that being from the property line. And then we've also defined the corner lot when measuring the lot widths at 50 feet, and it's shown in the table. Continuing with section 2-118, we've talked about the setbacks and reducing those setbacks to 0 and 3 feet on the side whenever we're looking at utility reserve. The example that we have in here, we're showing in P and R is a utility reserve. In this case, it's a 20-foot utility reserve with a 0 that would be on this side and 6 on the other. In the instance where we're on the 0-foot side, we're saying that we have to have a 3-foot maintenance easement that's required on that side for the property owners. And I'm going to get in a little bit more detail because there was a lot of discussion last time, I think, with in the workshop. This is where we're referencing it in that same table with the 0 on one side, 3 on the other, as well as where the maintenance easements are going to be required. Moving along in section 2-118, we were talking about proposing an average lot width of 40 feet. In order to do that, we want to maintain the density. So with that, requiring a minimum density of 10 dwelling units per acre. How do we measure that? We measure that by gross acreage, which is now going to be a defined term within the code, and then also by platted section. So the graphic that we have on this slide shows all of the lots that were within the preliminary plat for section 1 and taking that with the total of the plat itself. When we look at that, if we look at just the gross acreage, we're at 12.5 dwelling units per acre for that section, which is well above the 10 dwelling units of density that we're requiring. If we look at just the lots themselves and remove everything by example of rights-of-ways, utility reserves, civic spaces, etc., we're looking at greater of 18 dwelling units per acre based off of that preliminary plat. This is where we have those references again in the table with the density at 12 dwelling units, 40 feet, and then also having that compliance and how we measure that compliance, and that will be by plat. Previously in the workshop, I think it was mentioned why we didn't have preliminary plat in there. There was really not a good reason why we didn't, and we thank you for that feedback because that was put in there. We would want to know at a preliminary plat stage if something is or is not meeting the requirements of that code. So again, thank you for that suggestion, Commission. We're going to move along to section 2-119. This is where we talk about relief from the pedestrian realm from the existing parking garage. The way you'll have something that was put on the dais with some changes to this code. Previously, the code read that the pedestrian realm was not required along the length of the existing parking garage. What we found out through talking with the developer was that the intent was that it was always going to relieve the the pedestrian realm requirements from here to here. But the way that the regulation read, it was just from here to here. So we'd have a few feet over here where it just didn't make sense to pick up that pedestrian realm on that side, especially when we will have a pedestrian realm on this side. So that's why we're seeing a change that says it's for the existing parking garage and the property line that goes north with Creek Bend. So anything that's going to go south of the existing parking garage will have that requirement to pick up a pedestrian realm. So I hope that clarifies any questions. The next section we want to talk about 2-121, and these are the design and development standards we talk about for non-residential. This is where we put in information about the existing parking garage. We added an applicability statement that said this is just going to apply to new buildings and any major redevelopment that if it were to happen for the existing parking garage. Then we went and we defined major redevelopment. Major redevelopment means if you have an actual change in the principal use, which is what we were getting at, not necessarily percentages of changes to the building through improvement, but an actual change of use that now if we have that principal use change from an existing parking garage, this section would say that you now have to come in compliance with those design standards. The next section is section 2-112. This is where we look at the design for middle housing. This was a new concept that came up at your last workshop with allowing that primary entrance to be located on a side facade only when abutting a utility reserve. And with that, requiring a 5-foot pedestrian connection with the access easement to that MU. The picture shows an example of what that would look like, and the next few slides will give you a better illustration of mechanically how that would look like. If at any time you have a question, please feel free if you want to interrupt me through that, since I know that there were a lot of questions surrounding this last time. This is a really beautiful example of showing what this would look like. So this is your 20-foot utility reserve that has a stormwater easement in it. And here is where we would have a side entrance to the middle housing coming through here with a sidewalk. This shows us what that looks like here, where we have our utility reserve from here to here. And in this area is where we would have the access easement and the maintenance easement with that pedestrian sidewalk. Now we get to a graphic that I made that's not so great. This is showing the plat and how that practically would work using the preliminary plat with this reserve I with it being a utility reserve. Here's where we would have the access easement at 5 feet, and that's the access easement that the property owner is using from that side entrance to gain access to the MU, which is required. And then the 3-foot maintenance easement that would also overlap over the utility reserve so that property owner can maintain just regular maintenance on that 0-foot side. So it's overlapping easements that you would have on the plat in addition to that utility reserve, and within that utility reserve, you would see in this case, it's a stormwater easement running through. The next section we're going to look at, I promise we're towards the end, is section 10-3, which is our definitions. Again, this is where we added a definition for the major redevelopment. We added a definition for utility reserve, with utility reserve meaning a public and private utilities that are in a restricted reserve on a plat. We added gross acreage, which is, I believe, different from last time from what you saw on those. There's defining it as the dwelling unit per gross acre. And then also we have the revisions to the corner lot definition that include a street and a MU in addition to what it already says with a street and a street. We have some miscellaneous cleanup items. The MU definition in this chapter was not plural. The correct pronunciation is MUs, as it is reflected in chapter 5 in the subdivision regs. And then some other things, such as instead of having 0, spelling out 0 for consistency purposes in tables. Recapping, we've looked at our pedestrian realms and the existing parking garage, what those setbacks look like, and applicability and how we look at that for development standards. We have looked at the average lot width, with that being 40 feet in width of average, and then the density being maintained at 10 dwelling units per acre, and with that defining the gross acreage. We have also looked at 0 and 3 foot side yard setbacks when abutting a utility easement or a corner side. And with that, also defining where we can have some of those side facades when only abutting a utility reserve. Definitions, clarifications, numeric changes. With that, these are the points that we would like the commission to consider this evening with the changes before you. The changes before you preserve the existing development pattern of the mature trees, the existing driveway networks for vehicular access. It's maintaining the density that was always envisioned for this site. It's increasing flexibility standards where it is appropriate, not throughout the code. I say that because some of that flexibility comes in on the utility reserves, or it's a corner lot and not necessarily throughout the entire development. And it also, the biggest thing is it maintains the intent statement for the Lake Point redevelopment code. And I think the biggest of all is Lake Point, and this being a priority site, and it also supporting the City Council's adopted strategic action plan. So staff recommends holding a public hearing that's followed by consideration and action. Staff does support a recommendation of approval to the text amendment to the Lake Point redevelopment code, specifically in chapters 2 and chapter 10 of the Sugarland Development Code.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. At this time, and just for the record, we'll do the public hearing and then we'll move on to questions for staff and consideration of action. But this time, I'll open the public hearing. We will receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed text amendment to the Lake Point Redevelopment District, Chapter 2 zoning and Chapter 10 definitions of the Sugarland Development Code. Anyone signed up for a public hearing?
No, Chair, we do not.
Anyone here like to address the commission in public hearing before I close it? There's still time. He says to almost an empty chamber. Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing and we will move on to consideration of and action on a recommendation of the proposed text amendments to the Lake Point Redevelopment District, Chapter 2 zoning and Chapter 10 definitions of the Sugarland Development Code and Member City Council. Questions for staff?
I have a question.
All right. Yeah, we'll go. Everyone will get a chance. But I looked left first, so
Okay.
start down here.
Thanks, Jessica. So one question I have is around when we talked, we were having a public, trying to get the public to come in and see this. So how was that, what were the mailers used? Because since this is a new development, how many residents did this actually get to? I mean,
Since this is it's a code amendment, we don't do notification mailers with a certain radius. Our notification is done with the newspaper and the city's website. Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
Okay. That's that question. And then my next question is this utility easement. So are the utility easements going to be who's going to maintain the utility easements?
The utility easement in question that I was showing is going to be maintained by the HOA.
Okay, so when a resident then has their entrance within the utility boundaries, right? So the HOA is going to maintain their front stoop and everything?
Their front stoop wouldn't be over that property line. It's only going to be the access, so you would just have a sidewalk.
But wouldn't the entrance be within the utility, that 20 feet?
No, ma'am. The entrance will need to be within the property line itself, so the access itself. So your door could be on that 0,
Yeah.
and then the sidewalk. Obviously, if you need a step or something, we're
Right.
gonna have to set that back a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, but any of the landscaping and everything, then that's going to be maintained by the HOA because, I mean, you presented a very nice picture, a lot of landscaping and an arbor. I mean, I wouldn't think the HOA is going to take care of all of that.
It's my understanding that the HOA is going to maintain the fencing and these structures. We have not spoken specifically about the landscaping or if that homeowner does put in their own landscaping there or not. I know who will not be maintaining it is the city.
Okay. And then if something needs to be dug up in that utility easement, I mean, you're saying now that's at the 0 lot line, so it wouldn't impact? It would just sort of be out in front of their front door? Or if something had
Yes,
to be
ma'am.
dug up?
So typically with any easements, we will allow flat work in an easement. That's nothing that's different than what we do every day here. Flat work being that sidewalk. Now, in the event the city has to go in there and do some digging with some repair, that sidewalk is going to get messed up. Then it's going to get messed up, but it's not going to be on the city to repair that. I don't know if it'll be the HOA or the homeowner, but the responsibility of maintenance on those reserves is going to be to the HOA.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Jessica. When do the easements get granted? Is it been done, or have the easements been granted already? Or is it, it happens during the final plat?
Final plat, sir.
So typically easements have language in them that dictates that if it has to be torn up, who's responsible for putting them back and sequencing. So does the city have a plan to commissioners' comments to address that pre-plat and during recordation, or when does that happen?
Yes, so the easements will be recorded by plat. We've also talked about having like specific custom notes that would be on that final plat, just so people are aware of that. And there was one more other thing you asked that it flew out my mind.
Yeah, so if I'm buying it, I want to know who's going to be responsible for the maintenance and who's going to put it back the way it was done. So I just was curious as to what point, because when I have an easement I'm dealing with, you run to the plat, or you run to the deed really to figure out who's responsible for what. And I just want to make sure that, is to your point, we're allowing doors on the side of these homes, right? And so you don't want to end up with a door you can't use because nobody really talked about this in advance. And you've got an issue 15 years from now when a storm line has to come up because of a root or something. So
The plat will definitely have it. I understand what you're saying, that possibly if you are pulling a deed, it may not show up that is a part of it. But I think with the custom notes that we'll have on there that are going to refer back to like an encumbrance, I would say it's an encumbrance that property owner is going to have. It's something that we would check, or not we would check, but that they would be aware of.
okay. And then secondly, thank you for bringing this to us twice in workshop. I think it made a big difference and helped us understand. So thank you to staff.
Of course, thank you.
I have
Go
a
ahead,
quick question.
Commissioner Patel.
You said the landscaping is gonna be maintained by HOA. What are the estimated dues then? So we must know that, right?
I don't know that. I'm not even, our developer is here as well as their project coordinator. I'm not sure if they even know necessarily those numbers right now, because the greater part of the redevelopment concept plan, when that was adopted more than a year ago, that there are big, large civic spaces also that the HOA is going to be maintaining. So some of these really, let me kind of go back to... So some of these, larger areas, like they were talking about with the lawn, that's all going to be maintained by the HOA.
This one. Good evening. So just visiting with the developers. Just to clarify one thing, for the situation where there are the homes adjacent to the reserves that would be kind of used as side yards, that would likely be the property owners, those adjacent property owners that would maintain any additional landscaping or things that they may have in there, not necessarily HOA, since it's, but for all of like the public areas and things like that, that would be the HOA's responsibility. Yeah.
Well, then I have another question.
Anything further?
No, that'll be all. Thanks.
Just,
Vice Chair Hart?
can you refresh my memory? I don't remember why we have a minimum density instead of a maximum. Usually you hear about a maximum density per acre. What was the reason for the minimum?
The minimum is so that we can actually maintain density. If you put a maximum and then it's everything that's going to be below that. So you would never exceed that threshold, whereas we're looking at not going below that threshold because we want to maintain a more density than you would see, like, let's say, in a regular suburban environment.
Okay, that didn't tell me why we have a, what's the reason for the
The
minimum?
minimum-
What's the reason for the higher density then, I guess? What was the reason for that?
The reason for the higher density is because this zoning district is intended for that. So while the district, this redevelopment concept plan has urban homes and townhomes and multifamily, there are other residential types that this zoning district allows. So think of quadplexes, sixplexes. So you can get a pretty good amount of like density in here. So this is just the minimum. We don't want to go less than like 10 and still maintain the intent and the character of what the district is supposed to be.
Okay, I still don't see the reason for a minimum. The developer would put in the most cost-effective product in that area, right? Why are you making them?
We felt that when we were doing and adding the 40-foot averages, that this was a way that we could check and maintain that we were getting the product that we wanted. Because then you would have to, if you didn't have the density in there, then now you have to sort of define what are your parameters for an average lot width and what that means and what's too much. So if you're always able to maintain the density and you've got an average lot width too, it provides more flexibility of either way how you can make your math like scratch out, that the developer has a lot of tools that they can work with. Because if you just stick with an average lot width without putting density and regulating the density, what do we determine is average lot width? How far do we go, I guess? What are the parameters? How do you define it?
Okay,
May I follow up on that?
yeah.
I don't want
still
to interrupt you,
understand.
but may I follow up on that? So the minimum density, was that staff suggested or developer suggested?
Staff suggested, and it was in the code, in the original adoption of the code, this was in there. And it was previously taken out through a different amendment.
Okay, and developers obviously aware
Yes.
of the staff recommendation?
Yes.
And any feedback one way or another from the developer?
They've told us that they were able to distribute that they're exceeding 10, like just like we said, like 12, and above, like 12 to 13, they're able to get with dwelling units per acre, so well above 10.
Okay, and so they're on board?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm trying to get at what I think
Well, I
is
just don't understand why we have to have, I don't know what the why you're wanting to create a denser product if that's not what the developer wanted. We usually, like I said, there's a maximum density so that we don't have too much.
We want more. This is an opposite of not too
then
much.
let's go to the root of that. Why do we want more?
That's what the city council adopted when they adopted this code. They wanted more. They wanted middle housing. Sorry, it's not a phrase I'd used yet tonight.
No, I wasn't here for that. That's
Oh,
why I wasn't.
sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't either.
apologize. I wasn't here last year.
I wasn't either, so let me take you on the journey that I learned about myself. This was a strategic approach to what we call middle housing, that missing middle that the city doesn't have. And the city has worked towards increasing some of that density. This is more of a mix of use where it's not just housing and you have that option where you can have some commercial within the district. But the idea is that we don't have a typical suburban pattern here. We're able to have more residents in Sugar Land. More residents equal more property tax, more sales tax. And now we've kind of gone on. So it's something that it's mostly residential types that we've never allowed in Sugar Land prior. So with the adoption of the code in 2013, we said that this was something that we were a desirable product that we wanted to have represented in the city.
And was 10 arbitrary? How did you arrive at 10?
I wasn't here for the adoption of the code, so I don't know. I think it's not very dense, like 10. It's not an extreme amount of like density. I'm
Well,
from
that's why I'm-
Louisiana. This
yeah.
is nothing.
That's why I'm just trying to find out how, is it arbitrary? Was there a formula? You wanted so many units on,
I don't know if there was a formula. I can't speak to that, but maybe there's somebody that is. Sorry, you can go ahead.
So I was actually in the room when we created the code originally. So the spectrum of missing middle housing that we're talking about. So we have very like regular single family homes in the city, and then we have multifamily, but there's a spectrum in between, and that's the middle housing. So there's density set in there. I believe it was anywhere between like 8 to 24 units per acre is kind of what you'd constitute as that missing middle housing. So I think we picked something that was was easier to digest for like you guys and for the council as well. So we weren't going to go to that hyper dense missing middle housing, but we chose something that was more, pleasing, I guess, to what you guys. And we took this through, workshops and all that kind of stuff as well. So
and I appreciate you spending the time to tell me. I just wasn't here, and it wasn't there before, now it's here. And like I said, it's usually not a minimum, it's usually a maximum.
yeah.
And, if the developer is fine with that.
And it was something
hamstringing
that was
them.
mulled over for a while too, and I think brought forward to you guys. And so yeah, no, that's kind of where that number came from. So
If I could, speak on that a little bit. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Williams, Design Director at Lovett. When we heard, this Lake Point Redevelopment District, when we heard there was a minimum density requirement, that actually really attracted us to this because we share that vision of dense, walkable urbanism, creating memorable communities integrated with nature and the trails. And we think it's actually very inspiring that Planning Department and Council has adopted a minimum density compared to regionally, we typically see maximum densities. We think this product is in high demand. People want to be in neighborhoods where they know their neighbors, they can walk down the street and not see, 50 feet of lawns with 30-foot setbacks. The minimum density for us is a starting point. And to your point, it does give us the flexibility to go potentially up to 12, 15, 20% units, 20 units per acre. And so, what's very attractive to us is we'd love to see that kind of a minimum density adopted as a standard, as opposed to, taking up staff's time and revisions of like, this lot is this wide, this lot is this wide. By giving that, the minimum density gives us the flexibility to create that unique sense of place for the development. So we're definitely in favor of it.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I have a couple just, I think, high-level questions. First, and a comment. First one, so the slide on why this matters, please put that in every single presentation that y'all do. That was awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Secondly, just another question. So I was wondering if you or someone could just kind of speak to the process. And what I mean by that is follows. Obviously, at some point, we recommended approval and council approved and enacted the Lake Point Redevelopment District, and that had certain provisions in it. And those provisions, we've kind of gotten into the project a little bit now, and you've come back to us and asked us to basically make a recommendation of approval to change some of the language. Could you just talk like at a high level about how we got from point A to point B?
I will try to do my best. So this was a directive with staff years back to create this district. And as Ethan gave you a little bit of background on that, it got adopted. At the time when it got adopted, we did not have Lovett here at the table, to do anything. Who's going to start enacting things in real life? We had another, the first amendment that we did, I think was in May of 2025, we did an amendment, and that one was for some tweaking of some language. And I think if you recall, that amendment focused on Chapter 5, our subdivision regulations, where we wanted to make things a little bit more ready per se for redevelopment and development. Specifically, we looked at a lot like alleys and alley widths and those sort of things. We also had some items that were in the zoning that were better housed in the subdivision regulations. So we moved some stuff around. Fast forward later, then we had, Lovett in the initial stages with the redevelopment concept plan that was approved. And then another amendment had been brought before in November of 25 with that. And again, those were the initial stages of trying to create some flexibility. What's happened since November of 25 to now is they're actually doing the work. We have the plat. So it's pen to paper right now and how those things are working out. And because of preserving that tree canopy and the driveway network, we've got some really radial patterns of lots. So, speaking with Lovett and working through these things, we felt that these were the items that are brought before you were things that staff can support to provide that flexibility for the uniqueness of the project and the site. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So I heard two things in there. Tell me if this is correct or not. But staff has had additional time to look at the regulations and think thoughtfully about that. And there's also been, I'll use the word thoughtfully again, but there's also been thoughtful conversations with the developer and kind of a back and forth dialogue about, okay, now stuff's really happening, and so you're re-examining to some extent what's written in the regulation versus how the developer and their teams are trying to get from point A to point B as well. So you're working collaboratively, and some of the suggestions that you're bringing back are suggestions that are the fruit of that dialogue. Is that fair?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. And just as a model, you think that's a pretty good model, right? That city staff can think reflectively about the ordinances that are in place, and that they can work collaboratively with a developer and maybe from time to time suggest changes to the codes and regulations as they see fit.
Yes, sir. That's a great idea. Our codes don't sit on a shelf. They're a living document. And this being the first time, the city has some code like that, I think as planners, and probably you two as a body, you think you maybe got it perfect the first time around, but I don't know, no one's ever gotten anything, perfect. We read things in our code now and I'm like, why is that in there? Well, at some point, somebody probably thought that worked, but maybe it doesn't work for us, anymore. And things change, times change too, so.
Okay. And then I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it for the record. So I join Commissioner Brown's comments, so we appreciate the fact this was workshopped and provided us with an opportunity to think about it and take the suggestions back. Was there, if you think back to when we workshopped this, do you feel like there were any comments that P&Z made that you either didn't address, number one, or number two, you thought about it and said, well, actually, P&Z, we can't do that?
No, I think everything that we received back, the feedback from you all, I think was informative. And in some cases, maybe we didn't think about it in that manner. So you gave us that and something to go back and work with. So I would say everything that was brought before us and questions, we went back and we retooled and we addressed that for the commission.
Okay. So from a staff perspective, you're comfortable that you addressed, to the best of your ability, everything you heard from this commission, right?
Yes, sir. And I think having your feedback and working, I thought it was actually fun working through these workshops. I'm sorry I couldn't be here with you last time. But this has been a fun project, and I've enjoyed it. And I've, having that, being able to be collaborative with you guys, I really like that. So
Good. I appreciate it. All right. Anything else? Yep. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
So follow up back on my utility easement issue that I have. So you came back with that comment that said the homeowner then would need to maintain that area, right? I mean, it's not going to be the HOA?
with any planting, I think that they would put out their easement.
I'm thinking that, because I know even in the subdivision I've been in, sometimes it's a challenge of, oh yeah, I'm supposed to maintain that. I'm wondering that, just like when you're in the subdivision, you have to sign something that says, yep, I know there's an airport around here and I know I'm going to hear, that there should be something that if you're buying or purchasing a home that's on this easement, that this is going to be your responsibility just so that it's clear, because it could be different for those people than other residents within the same subdivision. So it's something to highlight that, you may think this is great, you've got this side entrance and all this room over here and this easement, but they got to know what they're getting themselves into.
We understand that, and I think that's where custom notes on that final plat are going to be very important, because the property owner is going to have this wonderful green space on that side. You're correct. They wouldn't be able to put up a shed or anything. You can't. It'll be very nice to look at, and maybe bring a lawn chair, and that's probably that's gonna be it.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add, Commissioner,
Sure.
the rules and regulations of the easement and who's responsible for install, maintenance, and to what degree will exist in the easement document. That is what will get referenced on the plat. And it should come in the preliminary plat. We should be able to see that. And it would be up to the homeowners, when you buy anything as a property owner, not everyone's gonna run you through all the nuances, right? There's gonna be things you're not gonna pick up on, but that's where that's gonna be.
Get the deed restricted, that being closed. Yeah.
Well, it'll be in the easement document.
Right, I'm just saying.
Yes, in the easement. Sorry, I
I
didn't.
agree
That was
with
a question.
the point
Yeah.
that at the time of sale,
Yeah,
you need to get as much, the buyer needs as much information as
yep,
possible.
agreed.
Understanding that sometimes, through no fault perhaps, that information comes after. And then, then you make lemonade.
There you go.
Okay,
Thank y'all.
any other questions? All right, do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the changes to the Lake Point redevelopment district for Chapter 2 zoning and Chapter 10 definitions of the Sugarland Development Code.
Okay, I've got a motion for a recommendation of approval to City Council for the proposed text amendments to the Lake Point redevelopment district, as you stated and as stated on the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I've got a second from Commissioner Patel. Any further discussion? Please vote. All right, passes 6-0. Thank you very much, Jessica. Thanks to all the other folks who contributed to the conversation, and thank you, commissioners. And obviously, thanks to staff and developer for everything that went into the process to bring this forward, and for workshopping it. I don't want to leave anything out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. How about that? We'll move on to item 7A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report from the August 18th meeting. Commissioner Hallbrook is not with us. I don't think I saw a report, so I'm going to skip that. Well, not skip it, but we'll move on. 7B, City Staff Report.
There you go. So your next meeting will be September 10th, Thursday, September 10th. We are still building that agenda, so we will keep you posted if for whatever reason we don't have any items to bring forward to you. But tentatively, please keep that on your calendar, and we'll see you then.
All right, any other business? I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. I'll give that one to Vice Chairman Hart since he was quicker on the hand. All in favor, say aye. Aye, that motion passes. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.